Hey world, welcome to the next episode of Working Well TV. I'm super excited about today because I've got a special guest with me, Holly Matthews. Do you want to introduce yourself?
I will. Thank you for having me. First of all, this is. I'm going to put out there. This is my first going live on LinkedIn. I've never. This is my my brand new welcome to LinkedIn. I love it. So I am an intuitive psychology coach. I'm the founder of the Happy Me Project. My background is that I was a TV actress for many, many years before going into the world of well-being. Although I always did it for myself, so I always being the person on the telly. And I grew up from being 11 years old. I started on TV. So I was the kid on the telly and then the adult on the telly. And that definitely makes it challenging when it comes to your mental health. So I was always doing it in the background, never really thought that it would be something that I did as a job, because performers are one track minded. This is all about being the performer. But then a series of life stuff that we all go through, most notably my husband died of brain cancer, and I suddenly realized I didn't care about acting, and that kind of took me into the space. So I have written 2 books. I have a membership, the Happy Me Project membership, and I get to walk around this planet helping people to feel more happy and less crappy, and it's a great job.
More happy and less crappy. I love that. I love that. Yeah, that's an interesting route into it. Do you know what? We obviously through the podcast that we run, we get to speak to loads of people who work in the world of well-being. Sorry, you're gonna have to ignore my kids wandering around in the background. School
Summer holidays, we expect kids. It's all happening.
I was going to say that people come from all sorts of different backgrounds. So typically it's HR or it's learning and development, something like that. But we hear different ones. We've got personal trainers who've got a real passion for this. People, IT managers who kind of come into well-being. I think actress is a new one on me. I don't think I've come across many actresses moved into, but you say that was more kind of a personal passion that led you that way.
I think, do you know what? I think it's much more common than you realize. There's kind of 2 camps of performer. I think there's performers who are very extroverted, although I would say I'm extroverted. I am very extroverted, very showy, and they enjoy the applause. And then you also get people like me who actually, what really interested me when I really got down to it was I'm obsessed with people and how our brains work and why we do things. And so for me as an actor, I got to learn about the character, get to know what they're like, what makes them tick, why they're doing what they're doing in this storyline. And then I would, walk in their shoes for a bit. That's not that dissimilar to what I do as a coach. I promise, don't pretend to be my clients unless I get to know them really well. And then I might do that, but that would be, that's a consensual thing. But as an actor, there's lots of similarities in terms of the work that you do and, the mindset work of it. And a lot of performers, I mean, it's fairly it's fairly obvious, I would say, based on what we see in celebrity culture and people in and out of rehabs and all of that kind of stuff. It's difficult, having your whole world be, on show. And for me, I started out in Biker Grove when I was 11, and all of my growing up was on TV. That's unusual. And really, I look at it now and I think all of my life, and I'm 40, old now. Now,
Not old. Not old. Can't be old because I'm only 40 as well.
All of my life has had a platform. And yeah, we're not Britney Spears, Jennifer Lopez kind of levels, but it's always been eyes on, which is an extremely weird psychological thing, because for a long time I was always perceiving myself from outside people. I was the character, I was the actress Holly Matthews. I was, how would I be perceived? What characters would I play? And now it's interesting because we are all in the world of being on a platform, whether it's LinkedIn, whether it's Instagram, whether it's Facebook. We've all got a platform now. So in some ways, I'm very, very equipped to deal with this world because I had it before anybody did. And I was dealing with trolls and all of that kind of stuff before we even knew what that was. So it's given me an interesting sort of take on things, and well-being's had to be part of it. I mean, when I wrote I've written 2 books, which I've just lovingly placed here so we can just plug them. So my first book, when I was writing that, you reflect back on when did I start doing this stuff? You go back on this stuff. And I asked a few people, and I asked one of my old cast members of Biker Grove. And I said, I don't know when did I talk about this stuff when I was younger? Because, you know, I did it from being really young. I did stuff before I knew what self-development was. And she was like, oh, yeah. She was like, you'd be sat on set or would be in the green room or something. And she said, and you'd be saying to everyone, guys, life is not a dress rehearsal. Like, we need to take it seriously. And I think I was just always this curious, deep child that had this kind of thirst for life. And you know, my dad was a welder and my mum worked at a bank. So it wasn't like I wasn't in a commune or anything. Like, there was nothing, or stage school kind of family as a normal working class family in Newcastle. So it's interesting how it comes about, isn't it, for people?
Really is. I love that comparison you've just made between you being on show and then how that's like people who just live their lives. Obviously, I've got 2 young children. I've got a 9-year-old and a 7-year-old, and I'm absolutely terrified about how social media will influence their lives growing up, and whether they should have a phone and whether they should be allowed a social media account and all that sort of thing. So yeah, the insight that you can give into that, given the the analogy of where you started out. How much support did you receive at the time? I'm not looking for some sort of scoop here, but like, you know what I mean. Like, do you feel that people in that industry?
It's hilarious. I mean, it's a different world. So we listen and we don't judge. We don't judge because we didn't understand it as much, and it wasn't the time for it. You know, it's 1997 when I started, so it was a long time ago, coming up 30 years to when I first kind of started in the show. So we didn't understand it as much. I don't remember anything at the beginning, any kind of no conversations about how are you or anything like that. I remember kind of halfway through my time, I was on 7 years. So I remember at some point, and I remember it really vividly because it was weird and it was embarrassing. And we had a tutor bus where we used to go when we weren't filming. We would go onto the tutor bus and we would be doing school. And I remember we were told we had to go there, and there was like a queue of the cast, like the main cast were all sort of stood in a queue. And then we had to go in this room, and essentially there was a psychologist there. And we went in this room, and it's so funny now, especially in the world that we're in. Basically, we just took turns going in this room, and they had this like clipboard, and it was like basically just, "You all right?" And we went, "Yeah." And they went, "Okay, off you pop. Send someone else in." That was the extent of it, to be honest. I mean, it was a lovely community that we had there. Like, we had chaperones that were lovely. We had, a great sort of team around us, but it was slag. Like, nobody was asking how anybody was, and a lot of the cast were struggling. 6 months of the year we went to normal school. 6 months of the year we were filming, and on and off, back and forward to school. So it was very noticeable. And most of the kids, in Newcastle at the time, there wasn't a drama school, or there's lots of different things now. But at the time it was, it was stand out. You went to a normal school, and a lot of the cast were bullied, and a lot of the cast were struggling with stuff. So there was nothing, and most of us just unpicked that later in therapy. So that's fine. We're all right, probably.
Yeah. I mean, you say it was a long time ago, but I've come across a few organisations, I won't name names, that don't do a huge amount more than that. even now, or certainly in the last kind of 5-10 years. So
sure.
Yeah, we live in this world, right? So we think that everybody's doing much more than that, and these large, mental health first aid networks and employee resource groups and all these sorts of things, but it's not always going on. And it'd be interesting to see whether, I'm sure that industry has changed, because
my oldest daughter is 14. She wants to be an actress. My youngest wants to be a footballer, and so I have always been I'm very aware. I'm aware of what didn't work. I'm aware of, not maybe my story, but other people's stories that were much darker. And we hear a lot of those certainly coming out of Hollywood, but, the UK is not far behind wherever that is. And so we have to be protective. And I remember when my oldest was interested in, TikTok and doing stuff like that, when she was quite probably the same age as your kid. And she was saying, "Mom, I want a non-private TikTok. I want it to be public." And I was like, "Absolutely not. No." And she was like, "Well, why not? Why not?" And I said, "Right." And I remember I was driving the car, and she's giving it loads. And my kids are very confident, feral, brilliant, little weirdos, love them to bits. But I've basically taught them to be too confident, and then that gets backfired in my face because they're very confident. So she's giving it loads in the back of the car. And I saw a man walking down the street, an old guy. I've pulled the car up, stopped the car, and I said, get out then and dance for that man. And she went, no, why not? She was like, what are you talking about? Like, all giving it attitude. And I said, that's exactly what I can't control. That some random weird man on the internet can see what you're doing, and that is not safe. And she was like, you were on TV as a kid. And I said, yeah. And do you know what had to happen? If somebody wanted to contact me, they had to write a letter, go to the post box, pop a stamp on this letter, send it to the casting department. That would come to me, production, and they would look at that letter and go, absolutely not. And we obviously got loads of weird stuff, and we didn't really see any of the fan mail, to be honest. We barely saw any of it. We'd probably just get handed a letter to sign and given it. We were very protected. Right now, social media, it terrifies me, like instant access. And my oldest had a video when she was, and it was my fault, and this is a lesson for everyone, right? She had a video go viral. And it was her, to be honest, I had a following on Facebook and stuff, but not massive. It was probably about 5,000 people. In my mind, that wasn't massive. I know to everyday men and women, that is a lot, but it wasn't a big thing. And I had a video of her. She was shouting at Theresa May, who was the Prime Minister at the time, about homelessness. My daughter she's very, black and white on what's right and what's wrong, as she should be. And we had a conversation about homelessness. And I said, well, Theresa May is the Prime Minister at the time, and she was saying, well, why can't the Queen buy the houses, and why can't you, Mum, buy the houses? And we were talking about it because I talk to my children about life. And ages later, she was like, I want to do a video to Theresa May. She sees me doing videos, she would see me talking, so it makes sense. To be honest, and you'll get this, Matt, and parents out there, you will get this. My letting her do this was a bribe to get her to go to bed, because she wouldn't go to sleep. And she was like, and I said, listen, if you do that video, if you go to sleep after this, straight away, you can do the video. So I filmed this video, and because she's always been really articulate, it was funny, right? And I put it on my Facebook, thinking it would get a little bit of a laugh. Naively, to be honest, I just thought it would just get, that's cute, right? It wasn't anything political as such, right? But within a couple of weeks, it got put onto some political satire Facebook. And they messaged me and said, this is going to go viral. And I was like, what does that mean? I mean, it was like, quite a few years ago now. Well, 10 years ago, was it really meant to go viral? And what it meant was Ellen DeGeneres, Russia Today, like massive. It went everywhere, 8 out of 10 cats. And it ended up being that Brooke ended up being on Dawn French's show, Little Big Shots. Her talent, which does please me slightly, was basically being opinionated. And it was just, they would give us something like, Brooke, plastic surgery, what do you think? And she would talk about that. But what was interesting about that was that time, suddenly it went everywhere. That was that feeling as a parent of the genie's out the bottle and I can't get it back in. And it scared me because the comments were vile. I mean, I've still got some of them. I mean, I'm good with dealing with those people because I think I'm hilarious and I'm not at all bothered by that stuff. But when it's your child that's being targeted at, and your child is being called a precocious C word by people, it's triggering. I'll be honest, it's triggering. And that scared me. And obviously Brooke was unaware of any of that. That wasn't anything. She was, she was like a child. She was 5. She didn't know any of that. But that's the kind of, that's the world we've got to teach our children to like themselves. Our defense against this is teach our kids to be confident, to know themselves, to like themselves. That's why, and I know we're going to talk about this now, this is why I talk about being your weirdest self. That to me is about authenticity. It's a protection from all of that stuff. I know my weird. I know who I am. I know the good, the bad, and the ugly. I know my shame. I know my stuff that I carry. I know my old story. I know why I've been horrible to people. I know when I've been done well. If we can, embrace all of that stuff and we can teach our kids to do the same, that's how we win. Because if we do that stuff and we do that work, well, somebody can come to me and they can say, you're an idiot. But that's their opinion. It doesn't it doesn't impact how I feel about myself. We can't control about how, what other people think about us. That's based on their life and how they've interpreted the world. It's, some people will like us, some people won't, but you only get there when you like yourself, when you aren't hiding all of that stuff, that you think you've done wrong, or you think everybody else is getting better than you. If you hide all of that away in some weird shame pit in your body and you carry that around with you, then you're always worried that you're going to get found out. You're always trying to be palatable to everybody else. And that's when you and I will end up speaking to people and working with people, because they've spent a lifetime doing that.
Yeah, sure. Well, first up, I'm not going to judge you for bribing your child, because that's my entire parenting style is threats and bribes. That's all I've got, threats and bribes. And without
works.
And without getting too deep, it matters, right? Because actually, a huge amount of childhood experience does impact people in their adulthood. Of course, it does, but also in the workplace. And I know the answer to all these things is always we need to teach it in school, right? But actually, having earlier conversations around mental health and well-being and being yourself and understanding that. Neurodiversity is another topic I know that you're passionate about. Having those conversations as early as possible, because I do come across people in the workplace setting who genuinely in their 30s and 40s, it's like the first time they've ever come across these things. And it's no wonder they feel uncomfortable or, psychologically unsafe to talk about some of these things at work, because it's the first time they've come across it and they've got all that baggage that they've brought from their childhood growing up. And
they've also been told, they've often been told that if, especially in a lot of workspaces, if you just work hard and you just be the good boy, the good girl, if you just, you just work hard and you just, you're polite and you do that, then you will reap all of the rewards. And then they learn that's not true. And not that I'm saying go and be horrible to everybody. I'm saying it, just working hard. If just working hard made you rich and, financially rich or whatever else, then, the single mum who's working 3 jobs would be a billionaire, right? We know it's not true, but what happens is people, they've learned to people please. They've learned to show up for other people. And like you say, they've never asked the question, is this what I want? They've never asked the question whether, what do I want even? I did a thing in my membership, the Happy Me Project membership, and we did a session. It was on assertiveness, and we were talking about assertiveness and what that looks like. And, a lot of people, particularly women, but, men as well, go from, being very meek, very people pleasery, not, just doing what everybody else wants them to do, to maybe a bit of passive aggressiveness, going on. But often they just jump straight to explosion. And it's the same when it comes to our mental health. We're often just, it's like the drip, drip, drip. We're not dealing with it. We're not looking at it. And then it's that explosion. But in that session, the assertiveness session, I did a little experiment because I was unsure. Being an opinionated, woman as I am, I have no problems saying what I think. But I did an experiment, which was, I thought, like low end, just share your opinion. I mean, we're talking like cats or dogs, or like, Diet Coke or full fat Coke, whatever. Like it was like what I felt were low end stuff. And what I found was there was still a huge chunk of the group that were looking to wait for other people to answer first before they said it. And in the workspace, if you want people to thrive, if you want people to be their brilliant self, you do not want them looking around for other people's opinions, because in that room, and this is why I talk about, in the workspace, being your weirdest self is your winning edge. You want a whole group of weirdos in your camp, because each one of those weirdos has got their own way of doing something that is unique and brilliant from the next person. Well, if they don't feel, as you said before, psychologically safe enough to be that version of themselves, to show up in that way, then you are losing out, because they're not feeling safe enough to share their opinion, to say. There's I forget the guy's name, the guy who the CEO of Netflix said that he felt, I've got a quote from him in my second book, which is on confidence. And he said that he believed that it was disloyal to Netflix to not share your opinion about in a meeting. It was disloyal. And I thought that was quite interesting, because if you've got an opinion, even if it's opposing to the rest of the group, but you think it's going to do that company a service because it's better that way, and you keep it to yourself, well, then that's you know you're not helping. So I thought it was interesting.
Okay, so I'm with you. By the way, I'll precede this by saying I'm with you, and I don't think that people should assimilate just into the environment and downplay their individuality and all that sort of thing. If I was going to play devil's advocate for just a second, what happens if they're a dick? And what happens if your authentic self is not at all suitable for the workplace? And not just that, I'm being flippant there. What if you're a dick? But what I mean is, where's the line where this becomes an excuse for bad behavior, where somebody's really acting up, for example, maybe a male CEO who thinks he's the boss of everything and tells everybody else, and you try and challenge them on it, and they say, well, that's just my authentic self. That's me. You shouldn't be trying to stunt that, right? Where's the balance between those two things?
It's a great question, because your authentic self doesn't mean you get to be a dickhead, right? That's absolutely not it. It doesn't mean that you are right inherently. It doesn't mean that because it's your belief or any of those things. There are always going to be, so when I'm talking about being your weirder self, you're integrating the parts of you. There's going to be parts of us, all of us, that might be a bit of a dickhead, right? There are going to be parts of us where how we do something or how we, I'm quick to temper, right? That's not a nice quality. I feel embarrassed. I say I'm quick to temper. All of my emotions, being an ADHD human, all of my emotions are in my throat. So I have to be aware. Joy is there, excitement is there, anger's ready to go. Like, they're all there. Now, when we know ourselves, I know that about myself. I do not want to be a person who is going around being awful to people and being a dick and being quick to temper. I don't want that. That's awful. I don't think that's a good quality. However, what we can do when we know these things about ourselves, or we maybe know that we are a person that leaves everything to the last minute, or we've got a tendency to procrastinate, or whatever else, right? The qualities that we might like to, they need some support. And essentially that's what you do. You have to then go, well, this is probably, this is part of my authentic self currently. Some things are movable, right? Yeah. But there'll be certain things that are kind of, part of your makeup. So if I know that about myself, what can I do to make sure I'm not a dick to other people with that? How can I channel quick to temper into something positive? Now, when I'm working with people, I often get them to look at the worst parts of yourself are often also the best parts of yourself if they are kept in check and you support them and you create a framework and a scaffolding. So anger being one, right? And an emotion that we feel, certainly as, British people feel very ashamed of that kind of conversation. I don't like to say to people, oh, I could be an angry person. I'm quick to temper. That feels really shameful and embarrassing. However, what it also allows me to be, the flip side of that, if it's channeled in the right way, is I will stand up for the underdog. I'll be the first person at the front line of, a protest. I'll be the one that will stand up for what I believe is right, to stick up for people. So or if I feel like there's an injustice, or that anger will fuel that passion to do something good, something charitable. And so if it's channeled in the right way, it can be good. Now, we can never force anybody to do this work. So if somebody is just being a dick in the workplace, then that does need to be challenged. You don't get to go, well, that's me. We see things, come up on Facebook a lot of the times where it's like, that's just, this is just me. This is me now. And people put up these things or you've got that friend where everyone just goes, that's just them. Well, I don't think that's acceptable, but I also think maybe some people are just not in the right role. That's potential. Some people might not even be in the right workspace, might not be with the right people, but it has to come from us. You, as an employer, you're going to be looking at this outside in. You want to bring out the best of somebody. So if you can see certain qualities, is there a way to help them to scaffold those to make them, safe in the workplace and get them to do some of that work? We can never force people, but maybe it's about, tweaking how they do something so they've got that support and they can have the good side. Another example might be impulsivity. I'm an impulsive human and I will jump in and do things. Now, the negative side of that is if I am too impulsive and there's no framework there for me to not make it negative, I'm going to make mistakes. if I have a framework, if I have a support network, if people know this about me and I can check in with them, then I can use that for something good. On the flip side of impulsivity being the negative side is I'll jump in and give things a go with little worry about that. So there's always going to be a positive to what you might see as a negative. We can see on the back of me there, you were never too much, they just weren't enough. Now, too much is a story that a lot of people carry. Too much or not enough. For me, too much was something, you're too much, you're too loud, you talk too much, your clothes are too loud, whatever, right? It's too much. But my too muchness is why I stand on stages, talk all around the world. My too muchness is why I've written books, why I talk on TV, why I do what I do. So it can't all be bad. Does that mean that I shouldn't shut up sometimes? No. One of these times might be now because we've got a lot of words. But it just means it's about, it's about framing that, I think. It's not a free-for-all. You can, be an arsehole in the workplace. We have to help people to get to know themselves and put them in the right places.
Yeah, that's a really good answer. And I was asking for a friend, I promise, not me. No, and also you think, what's the opposite? Well, the opposite alternative is that you suppress the lot, right? You just suppress all of this, you assimilate entirely into an environment, and that can't be positive either. Can I ask you a quick question? Again, trying to get this right in my head and get your thoughts on it. If you were hiring, so you work in an organization and you're hiring a new team or a new person in your team, are you more bothered about their individual skills, or are you more bothered about cultural fit and them getting on with the people that you already have in your organization? And
I am going to say, obviously, firstly, it's always going to be a bit of both. You can't have somebody coming in with zero skills. But I'll use an example of, I once spoke to a film director, a really big film director, and I was networking. So I was asking him questions, and I said to him, he said to me that if he had two people come in and they were both good actors, right? One was brilliant. So let's say you're skilled. One was brilliant at what they did. The other one was really good, not quite as good skill-wise as this one, but they really liked them and they got on with people. They chose that person every time. And it'd bring them up to scratch. Now, in terms of I guess the caveat is, most people aren't extremes, firstly, right? So
Sure.
Most people aren't coming in with all this skill and some Machiavellian bad guy. So there might be an element that you can teach that person to fit into the culture a little bit, potentially. But I think you do have to look at the culture. I think that's so important. There is a potential that you can just train somebody up in a skill. When we're talking about the uniqueness of somebody, their real quirks of their character, there is going to be some individual stuff that you can't get elsewhere. But I think that's kind of what we call the X factor. And those kind of unicorn people, sometimes you will put them in your organization because they have such a unique way of doing something that is so brilliant. And we know these people, but let's be real, they are the unicorns. They're not the obvious ones. It's not the standard. They're the one-offs. And you might have to put them in a workplace where maybe they're not always fit in the culture, but you teach everyone around, you try to teach them, fit them in, but that is a unicorn. The majority of people are going to be able to, you're going to want to go with culture, I would suggest, over standard skills.
Okay, fair enough.
That might not be what people would say, but
I agree.
important.
And when you talk about culture, what do I really mean by that? I mean, behaviors, I mean, values as well, so a strong alignment with values, that's probably what I mean there. So absolutely, I think the answer that you've given there is a really good guidance on how to do it. But I asked the question because, again, sometimes these things, obviously you see the polar, the two-sided nature of it, but you're thinking, right, I'm hiring someone. Do I go for one or do I go for the other? Like you say, very rarely. It's normally somewhere in the middle.
Most people want to, most of us want to work with people that we like. That's just the truth of it. I mean, I worked for a long time with a company as just freelancing for them. And I was working with people on job interview technique and teaching, Oxford and Cambridge grads how to actually people in in job interviews. And one of the things that I learned straight away was, when we are in any space, and how we like, how when we get on with people, it's the same reasons why we do. We have to connect on, and I forget all of them exactly, but there's 6 universal criteria across the world that if we don't connect on a few of these, we will not get on. One of them is worldview. One of them will be sense of humor. One of them is language, but not just language in terms of, do you speak English or do you speak Spanish? More, it could be millennial, Gen Z. It could be, have we got some commonality here? Are we using the same wording, the same way of doing something? Schools, organizations, have we been in the same institutions? We are looking for that. So when we bring someone into the workplace, we want to know, can I have a laugh with this person as well as doing great work? Do we have the same, I know people get really triggered by political opinions, but it doesn't necessarily have to be left or right. It's about worldview. It's how you see the world. There's going to be people on both left and right that might, be slightly at the middle, and it might be easier to be in the same vicinity. But those things matter. They matter maybe less at the beginning because everybody's going to be on their best behavior at the beginning, but they will matter as you go forward in that job, and it will spill out into everything. So I think, longer term, it is much better to send somebody to do a course and learn a skill and have a better culture in your workspace.
Yeah, those universal factors, they really resonate with me. As you were saying it, and probably because I saw my wife walk in the background there, it kind of brings to mind, like, the relationship I have with her. In many ways, we're very different people, and we always say that, like, both in terms of temperament sometimes, but also in terms of the things we like. I like football, she hates football, and that's fine, because across some of the things that you mentioned there, we absolutely share a lot of values. So it's thinking, how do you scale that across an organization? How do you scale that across an organization of 10,000 people? That's when it becomes harder, right? Not impossible, but
it's not impossible. I think, when I'm talking about, be weird and all of that, there's always nuance to this. But I think the thing that we see, now is that what we don't want, right? If we want to be great in whatever that is, and not even just in the workplace, if we want to have great connections, great partnerships, great friendships, we have to be showing a unique side of us. If it's everything is the same, and we've got more ways to compare ourselves than ever before, so we can see what other people are doing, and we see these trends because everyone's trying to be the same as everybody else. And I'm not saying that we're going to be immune to those things, of course not, right? We've barely any of us had a unique experience. We've learned since being online, but I think that the more that we can give people space and encourage them having their own opinions, we will see better connections. We see much more creative ways of doing things in the workplace, much more innovative stuff come out, because everyone isn't so terrified to, everyone isn't trying to stay in that middle range, in that beige. That's not what we want as employers, and or in our friendship. And I often say to people, when the way to dare to share. Right? Dare to share, meaning start to share things about yourself that maybe, you wouldn't always share, but that opens you up. I share things with people all the time, and the things that get people to connect with me more than ever, I could stand here and I could list, awards I've got, or like fancy things I've done or been to, and you would go, oh, that's interesting, maybe, right? But would it make us connect? Probably not, right? Often, and I joke about this because it makes me laugh every time, because it's not what you would get taught at networking things. It'd be like, you've got to share the work, things that you've done, and impress people and all of that. The thing that people talk to me most about is the fact I don't like mushrooms. I've written it on my newsletter or my website somewhere. It's just like a fact about me. And I really do I like a lot of food, but mushrooms are vile. And it's a polarizing opinion. People do it, they don't. But it makes me laugh how much it's the thing. Like, I'll be at an event or something, and someone might follow me on social media and they'll say, I don't like mushrooms as well. And we're like, we're friends for life, right? We know. Or someone will be like, I do like mushrooms and I want to convert you. And I'm like, sit down, you will not convert me. But then you can connect, because we don't connect in our perfect. We connect in our mess. We connect in our chaos. We connect in our silly stories. And that's workplace or not.
Yeah. Well, first off, mushrooms are amazing. So you're wrong. But but the other thing, no, in fact, I'm not even
Got
sure.
nothing more to say. That's it. Mushrooms
Do
are
you know
great.
what? Do you know what you're saying about your mess? Unless your deep dark secret that your weird thing is universally frowned upon, like mine, which I shouldn't really say. I'm even scared to say out loud, which is I'm going to whisper it. I don't like dogs, and I think they should ban dogs from the world,
That
which
is
makes me hated by like 99% of people. But
not all. Not all.
not all. I'll just
And if
live
you
in a
have
cave with my 1% of people. Yeah,
the
I don't mind them. I don't hate dogs. I don't mind them. They're all right.
Just not
totally indifferent to them. Yeah, totally indifferent.
Yeah, but I think that's a fair opinion. I think there'll be much more. See, this is why I got to speak up. I think there's more people sitting in those murky shadows, worried about saying, "I ain't that bothered." I'm not that bothered about it. I'm not that bothered about Game of Thrones or Peaky Blinders. I've never watched Harry Potter or a James Bond. That gets people's back up. People don't, they frown upon it. Why not? Like, there's certain cultural things, dogs being a cultural thing, certainly here in the UK. People do frown upon it. But when we say things, there's something refreshing about you saying that you don't. I mean, you didn't say, "I want to kill dogs."
No. Not some dog genocide. Plus, as well, I'd always leave my mind open to the fact that
you might fall in love with the dog.
Exactly. Maybe if I got a dog, maybe I'd feel differently. Because another one, which again is even more frowned upon to say, was I don't really like kids. But then I had my own kids, and I flipping love them.
Yeah, you might think I'm not.
I love all kids now. Like
I had my kids by millennial standards quite young. I was 26 when I had my kids, and so and I was not the one that picked up babies. I wasn't fussed. Like, I was like, oh yeah, we'll have kids sometime. Like, I would like to, but I wasn't like excited. Like, about when I got pregnant, I was like, oh, this could be cool. But I was very calm. They're brilliant. But even when I first had my first daughter, I was like, people say like, oh, this instant rush of love. Yeah, I loved her because she was mine. But I also was like, I need to get to know her. I've just met her. She's brand new. Like, we're going to get to know each other. We're going to do this together. And so, I think there's something that excites a lot of us, I think, about the gray area of life like that. The conversations, and we're not talking the extremes, by the way, right? I know like it's easy to jump to those, but most people don't live in the extremes, right? We're not talking about like you say, dog genocide. We're not, those extremes are like that. That's the periphery, right? And yeah, that's, we can have deep, but most of us live in the middle. But there is a gray area in lots of conversations. There are many conversations we're afraid to have, but actually amazing stuff comes out of that. Yesterday was the horrible anniversary of my husband. Was the anniversary of my husband's death yesterday, and it got into a conversation because I was saying that what we don't talk about in grief is the trauma of surrounding grief, especially if you've cared for somebody in their dying days. There's a lot of trauma around that. There's a lot of trauma around brain cancer and what happens to somebody, or dementia, or any kind of brain injury. You have experienced a lot of stuff that you won't have that I haven't talked about, it opened up. I hadn't really spoken about it before, and I was saying, this isn't a day for me to be like, remember my husband. It doesn't really feel like that. It's actually a very traumatic day and a sad day, and it brings up all of that trauma. And the reason I'm saying that is because it opened up I had so many messages of people yesterday because I spoke about it on Instagram and Facebook, and a lot of people messaged me and said, yeah, I felt like that. I haven't dealt with the trauma of my mum dying, or that I had to, put her in a home, and this had to happen, or she had to live with me and I didn't have carers. And it made me go, oh, wow, that's a conversation I've never had before with anybody else. And look how connecting it is. There are so many silly or serious conversations that when we have them, we might come up with a brand new idea, or we might just feel a little less alone in this world. And as you and I know, that's one of the most important things when we talk about and we have these big conversations. That's why I share my stuff, because when I share my mess and my chaos and my sadness, and as well as my joy, then people can go, oh, wow, like, that feels more inspiring than when we just see people's good stuff. I don't, to be honest, I find it, I don't know how you feel it, I find it very uninspiring just seeing the shiny side of somebody's life. I want to know, show me the messy cupboard. Where is the messy cupboard in your house? My messy cupboard is my house, but other people who are tidy might have one, you know, like Monica on Friends when she has that one cupboard that she keeps.
Yeah,
I want to see. I want to see your edge.
You mean now? Do you want me to take you? No, I'm not doing that. I'm not doing that. I've kept you too long already. Thank you so much for sharing with me today, by the way. Really appreciate it. We've overshot the time, but honestly, so fascinated by the stuff that you're talking about. Genuinely inspired as well.
Thank you. Can I invite them to a Be Weird live event I'm doing? And you are absolutely welcome to come as well, Matt. So in October the 4th, I'm doing Be Weird Live, which is an in-person event in Coventry. I'm also doing it in Newcastle on the 15th of November. And it is going to be a whole day of unleashing your inner weirdo. There'll be lots of activities. We have some guests coming in to do laughter yoga. It's going to be about getting out of your comfort zone a little bit. There'll be some amazing businesses there, and it's going to be a whole day of really just, you know, stepping into ourselves. It's going to be good fun. So you're more than welcome to come. And I'll pop a link when we post this. When this goes out, I'll pop a link below, and I'll send you the links as well, so people can come and join and hang out. And the theme of it is wear what you dare. Okay, theme of it. See what you come up with.
Okay. I've got an inflatable Pikachu suit. I come in that.
Perfect. I'm here for it. I mean,
I can't move in it, but you know, it's all good. Love it. Well, so that would be great. We'll put some of the links on. I was going to ask, as a kind of final question, where can people find you? I'm guessing social media is a good place to start, right? Have you got a website as well?
Yeah, I am hollymatthews.com. And if you type in Holly Matthews or I'm Holly Matthews and you can't find me online, then the internet is broken and you should phone somebody. I'll be there. Just come and say hi. And let me know that you came from this as well, because it's nice to know where people came from.
Amazing. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you so much.
I'll speak to you again soon, I'm sure.
Soon. Take care.